I'm going to do a series of videos to hopefully help people learn to fly in acro or rate mode. I've wanted to do this series of videos for some time now, but all the work required to capture flight video, to record voiceovers, capture stick overlays, and then put that all together in post and make the series, it just was too much work and I never got around to it. But I've recently been playing with FPV Freerider, which I think is a pretty decent FPV quadcopter simulator. No simulator is perfect, but I really feel like people can legitimately learn to fly on this. I don't have any affiliation with them, by the way. I discovered it. Some friends of mine started flying it. I thought it was good, and I thought, hey, this would be a great tool to use to do this series of videos. So you can download it. It's free. You get one map and basic configuration. I think you get the desert map, and for $5 you get the full thing, which is what I'm using. So let's just take a look at the settings I'm using. These are the default settings. I am using these. I'm going to use the default settings because I'm pretty sure that in the free mode you can't change the settings. So I believe that the default settings should be what the free mode uses by default. That way anybody who's using the free mode can also get the same flight experience that I'm showing here in the videos. Also, another setting that is, I think, really important, and again, I believe this is available in the free mode. By default, the setting is to have the throttle zeroed at the center of the throttle travel, which sort of makes no sense to me. Like, the whole bottom half of the throttle range doesn't do anything, and that's not how any transmitter I've ever flown has been set up. So you're going to want to change this to 0 at bottom, and that, I believe, is the only sort of configuration information you're going to need to follow along with what I'm doing. So now I'm going to go into the desert track. That should be the track that you have access to if you have the free mode. And we'll do our first exercise. Before we do that, notice that acro mode is on. Go ahead and turn that on. And I've got low rates configured, which I think many beginners will be most comfortable with. If you find that you feel comfortable with high rates, feel free, go right ahead. And I've also got the camera. It starts up in third-person camera, but we're going to go ahead and shift to first-person camera before we do the exercise. The first exercise is going to be using the throttle to manage your altitude. So what I want you to do is leave the pitch and roll stick alone and don't use yaw either. Just start to raise the throttle a little bit. And as you raise it a little bit, you'll hear the motors start to come on. For every copter, there is a hover point on the throttle where the copter is putting out just enough thrust that it's maintaining its own altitude. If the throttle is below the hover point, the copter will descend, and if the throttle is above the hover point, the copter will climb. So as I start to raise the throttle, slowly, 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 the copter will start to take off. And now we've just reached and are slightly above the hover point. What I want you to do is gently raise and lower the throttle just the tiniest bit to keep the horizon at about the same place in your camera view. And if you can see objects on the ground, you can use that to judge your altitude as well. See, I'm climbing, so I'm going to lower the throttle slightly. Very nice. Now, you probably will not find an exact point on your stick where the copter perfectly hovers. I've almost found that point. I'm climbing just slightly, but I'm nearly there. I'm going to lower the stick just a tiny bit. It's gonna fall. I'm drifting. Don't worry about that. I'm falling, so I'm going to raise it slightly. I'm drifting. I don't need to worry about drifting because we're in a simulator, so if I crash into the mountain or something, who cares? Just focus on your altitude. Don't focus on your position at all. I'm just going to slowly raise and lower. Just the tiniest movements are necessary to accomplish this. If you make too big of a movement, you'll sort of surge up and down, and you'll get behind the copter, and it'll be very hard to control. Okay, so just make the tiniest movements necessary to correct. And if you find that you're climbing, lower it just a bit until you start to fall. And if you find that you're falling, raise it just a bit so that you start to climb, or at least arrest the fall. And And you want to just practice that until you get that sensitivity. And bear in mind that a real copter is going to be way more powerful than this. This is not a very powerful copter. Even a 3S copter with 6-inch props this is probably roughly equivalent to a 3S copter with maybe 50-30 props, I would guess. So one of the least powerful FPV multi-rotors you're gonna find out there. Most of them are going to be more powerful, and the throttle is going to be more sensitive. So it can be done. It can be done, but it definitely takes some practice. All right, well, that's going to be the end of this lesson, using the throttle to manage your altitude. I think this really shows the benefit of the simulator. Number one, just because you don't have to rebuild your copter every time you crash, but also because it gives you the freedom to focus on one thing at a time. You can focus just on the throttle without worrying about the fact that you're about to crash into a tree or fly over a road or anything like that. So hope this was helpful. Hope you enjoyed it, and stick around for more.